The IPFW men's volleyball team continued their 2016 season this past weekend with 2 home matches on Arnie Ball Court. On Friday night, the VolleyDons took on Sacred Heart University and defeated the Pioneers by a score of 3-1. On Saturday, unfortunately, the VolleyDons lost at the hands of Harvard in 3 straight sets. I'll be joined this week by head men's volleyball coach Ryan Perrotte to discuss this weekend's matches, as well as looking ahead to this coming road trip this weekend out to Pennsylvania to face off against Penn State University and St. Francis University. In the Spotlight segment this week, we'll be joined by senior opposite Andrew Sellan to discuss his impact on the team, as well as some other extracurricular activities that he has going on in his personal life. Stay tuned for more on this week's edition of VolleyDons Weekly on CTV. Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong, and joining me in this first segment will be head men's volleyball coach Ryan Perrotte. A quick shout out to our sponsors for the show, IAB, Indiana Physical Therapy, Moulton, O&E, and Pizza Hut. Like I said during the opening, the VolleyDons had 2 matches this past weekend, one against Sacred Heart on Friday night and one against Harvard. Similar to the first week of the 2016 season, the VolleyDons split their matches with 1 victory coming on Friday and then a loss Saturday afternoon. So then, head coach Ryan Perrotte, what do you think about this weekend's matches?
Are we live?
We are. Red light's on.
We're on the Cinco. I love it. We are on the Cinco. This is a new network. It's no longer CATV, right?
No, CTV now.
CTV. By the way, there's a CTV in Canada too, by the way. It's called Canadian Television, CTV.
Is that what you would watch every night usually before you go to bed?
Right. No, I watch the CBC.
Oh, CBC.
It's pretty amazing. Public broadcaster. The Cinco. We're on the Cinco.
If you say so. Whatever you say. You get paid the big bucks,
That's
right?
a very interesting statistic you just provided. Did you know that we from now on, we are just going to play volleyball matches on Friday.
At home.
And at home. Because we are undefeated at 2-0 on Fridays.
Sounds good to me.
And I'm going to get rid of all Saturday matches because we're 0-2 on Saturday. Who did the scheduling? I got to get a hold of JW.
I'm sure he'd love to hear you complain about that.
The Cinco, huh? The Cinco. I love that. Okay, let's talk volleyball.
Yeah, let's get to Friday's match,
okay,
which is where we started the weekend against Sacred Heart inside of the Gate Sports Center on Arnie Ball Court. First set of Friday's match, not necessarily what we would consider IPFW volleyball.
No, we got off to a slow start Friday against Sacred Heart. And it seemed to be a theme, by the way. And thankfully, we got out of it about 6 or 7 points into the second set. And to their credit, to Sacred Heart's credit, they actually came out and played pretty inspired volleyball. I thought they served the ball particularly well. Their transition game was really good. And we couldn't get anything going. And we actually served the ball pretty well. Our defense wasn't there. And then somewhere in the second set, guys seemed to elevate their play a little bit. Our serving was really good, and our blocking really took over, I thought, and really controlled the tempo of the match. I think we finished with 10.5 blocks. I think you have the stats there. And then our distribution offensively was very, very good. I think Tony Price had a double-double. I think he hit for 500 on the left side. I think David Frazee was 14-0-18 and played very well in the middle, and Graydon Schrader played very well. So it was a great collective team effort. But I thought our serving, once we got the ball off the libero for Sacred Heart, it was really, really good. That set up the fact that we were able to block the ball and control the net.
Right. I remember when we were on the bench kind of looking at what adjustments we needed to make from the first set to the second set, looking at the passing statistics that we keep for not only what our team passes, but also their team. We keep it on a 3-point scale, 3 points being a perfect pass where the setter doesn't really have to move and has all of their options to either set the outside, the middle, a back row attack, or the right side. Mm-hmm. 2 point being they have to move a little bit, but it's still a pretty decent pass. 1 point is where we get them out of system. Sacred Heart's libero was pretty much passing a 2-5 at 55% perfect off of all of our serves because we were serving him so often. So I felt that we were able to make a really great change serving-wise, tactically, to pin the ball more on their outsides to get them out of system, which also then led to us having so many more blocks into the second, third, and fourth set as well.
Well, I mean, we talk about it all the time, and it doesn't matter what volleyball show you watch. Serving and passing is the key. It's the foundation to have success. And you're right, their libero was very, very good. And if you remember the very first match we played on Friday, a week ago, against Alderson Broaddus, I think everybody missed a serve, at least going through their first rotation. We had 11 missed serves the opening set. And I preached to our guys the same thing, which I think has existed since the sports began. Teams win or lose because of two options. You either execute a game plan perfectly and you never have to change anything, or you got to make in-house adjustments or in-game adjustments. And by us making that adjustment to not serve the libero, which you shouldn't do in the first place, but we did for some reason in the first set against Sacred Heart, that's what really propelled us to control the match against Sacred Heart.
So in addition to the 10 blocks that the Mastodons had Friday night against Sacred Heart, they also hit at just over 400, which is a pretty good hitting percentage for what you want to see. Had 4 aces to go along with 18 service errors. Service errors still a little bit high, but I felt that the service errors, especially in the third and fourth set, were more aggressive service errors than ones of just not executing.
Yeah, you can stomach some of the errors as long as you're going after it. The good thing about our offense, because you talked on the number about hitting close to 400, I sat down with our setters and met with them before season started, and one of the goals that we talked about was to have a hitting percentage of above 300. If you can hit above 300, that's pretty good. It's usually good enough to win. There are some matches now that I see that are each team is hitting over 400, and you're going, holy cow, there's no defense being played. But 300 is the set mark. And I love the fact that we had distribution. I think 5 out of our 6 guys hit over 200. I think 4 out of our 6 guys hit over 400. So from that standpoint, offensively, that was a really good statistical match for us.
Right, and now turning from a good statistical match on Friday night to a not so good statistical match Saturday afternoon when we took the court against Harvard. Instead of playing at 7 o'clock in the evening, we played a 4 o'clock afternoon match to accommodate their travel schedule so they would be able to get back to Boston in time over a 2-day period to still make classes on Monday. But just talk generally about your overall feels of how that match went, what you felt the guys were going through, or anything from that standpoint.
Well, thank goodness we're on cable television. We're on the Cinco. Because I can use foul language to describe the match on Saturday. No, I'm kidding, of course. It'll be very interesting because you got to ask Andy Sellan whether or not playing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon disrupted our play. And we have 2 afternoon matches this year, one at 4, which was this past weekend against Harvard, and then one homecoming weekend at 3 o'clock versus Loyola. We were flat from the get-go. And 2 points into the volleyball match, there was a play that the Harvard player goes and tips the ball over our block. And I remember saying this to everybody on the bench. I said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And everybody looked and go, how can you tip 2 points in a event? Because I said we were so slow to react to the ball, that indicated how we were going to play the rest of the way, and it became contagious. We tried to put up a valiant effort in terms of fighting and coming back, but you can't allow good teams. You can't come into a gym and just expect to show up and roll and have teams roll over for you. It doesn't happen that way. And to Harvard's credit, they were sleepwalking. They looked like they didn't want to be there after they had lost the night before at Ball State. And after losing a very close opening set where we had an opportunity to win, it just went by the wayside, and we could never get in rhythm. We could never get into sync offensively or defensively. We didn't make the in-game adjustments that we did, like we did Friday night against Sacred Heart, and it was just a costly defeat.
A tough match for the Mastodons for sure on Saturday against Harvard. But in the next segment, we'll be talking with senior right side Andrew Sellan and discuss a little bit more about his role. And according to Rock, we should ask him how he felt about playing in the afternoon. And then Rock will be joining us again during the final segment to talk a little bit more about this Harvard match, as well as looking ahead to our matches this coming weekend in Pennsylvania. You're watching VolleyDons Weekly on CTV.
My field, modeling and animation, is a growing field in importance because it's not related with cinematics or movies or entertainment industry. It's related with science and how artists help to scientists to make good renditions of something that is no longer available. That relationship and that collaboration is extremely important today.
Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong. In this week's Spotlight segment, we'll be talking to senior opposite Andrew Sellan to learn a little bit more about his thoughts of the season so far, as well as his plans for the future. How's it going, Andy?
It's going pretty well. Middle of the week after a couple matches, and a couple practices now, but it's going all right. Getting ready for the weekend.
So before we get into talking about Saturday's match against Harvard and asking the question that Rock had posed to you during our first segment, I want to talk a little bit not only about Friday's match against Sacred Heart, but also a little bit about preseason, the way two-a-days went, as well as the first two matches last weekend.
Well, in order to talk about our preseason and I guess even the beginning of the season so far, you have to get an idea of what the team is like. And it's been mentioned many times before, but we have 19 players on the team, of which more than half are freshmen. And so, their preseason was not just their first time, playing at a college level, but their first time for a lot of them, being away from home for that long. They have to take care of themselves, their schoolwork. Nobody's really looking after them, all day long. So it's an adjustment, for their schedule, and for them to really just take care of themselves, to not just be successful students, but to be successful athletes. And I think that with that responsibility came a lot of maturity that translated onto the court. So with all these guys coming in pretty young and you could say fresh, for they were freshmen, they've really matured a lot, and since then have become key role players on our team. The preseason went pretty well. We did a lot of basics, a lot of ball control, a lot of technique and a lot of positioning, a lot of learning. I can tell that for some of the older players, it was nice to have a little bit of that refreshment, but also it would get a little mundane every now and then. But it was still necessary, and I think the preseason you saw an elevation of our play as it went along. And then when everybody came back for two-a-days, it was apparent that a lot of that had taken hold. For we now have two true freshmen that are starters, and I think they've been both doing a really great job so far. And then our two-a-days, like you mentioned, they started at the beginning of January, and we had them for, I think it was 5 days. And that takes a toll on your body, of course, but and that shows too with a bit of our lineup right now. We've had a couple minor injuries that have given some other players some playing time instead, but that's been good. That's been showing some of our depth. But since then, we've had 4 matches now, and I think that as I'm sure we'll talk about, there's definitely room for improvement. But I think overall we've been doing some pretty good things on the court.
Talking about the ways to improve as the season continues on, Friday night's match, a 3-1 victory for the VolleyDons on Arnie Ball court. The first set, as we discussed early in the first segment, a little bit of a slow start, but then we were able to turn things around on court. How does that kind of happen, not only from a tactical standpoint as coaches trying to help the team make some adjustments, but in terms of your level of play as an athlete on the floor?
Well, we talk about it as a 3-1 victory, but we went into the game plan, hoping for that 3-0 victory. So, and not to be cynical about the game, but we still didn't quite meet our expectations, even with the victory. So, there's a little bit of a downside to that. And I think after the first set, other than being perhaps frustrated with ourselves, we were eager to get back on the right path. And instead of letting maybe nerves or our nonchalant effort or feelings take over, we really took it upon ourselves to realize what we had to do and realized how we had to get it done. And I think we just came together as a team pretty well then. And our scouting reports this year have been much more in detail and very, very specified than they have in years past. And I think that's a great credit to the victories we've had so far and a lot of what we've been doing on the court. I think it helps us really prepare. And I think after the first set, we realized, wow, this is exactly what they told us was going to happen. So, we talked with the coaches and then we helped make some adjustments, and that helped with our success.
And then continuing on to Saturday's match, as it's been said, it was a 3-0 sweep in favor of Harvard. Kind of a slow start again in some ways, similar to Friday night. Was playing in the afternoon any difference for you or any of the guys in preparation, having to be in the gym a little bit earlier, maybe not getting that usual game day nap in right after the afternoon, any of those preparations?
I love that nap before games. But what time do we practice every day?
Usually from 3:30 to 6 o'clock is usually our practice time.
Exactly. So a game starting at 4 o'clock is no excuse. There's no reason why that should affect us in any different way than a 7 o'clock game should. Granted, we don't typically have a match, the night before, and then turn around and have that shorter turnaround period. But again, that's still no excuse for time. I don't think there was any difference with the time of day that we played. I think we just came out flat, and I don't know if we necessarily thought that it was going to be a bit of an easier match than what ended up being, but we just could not get really anything going, and it was very difficult to make plays when our complete effort wasn't there, and it was disappointing from everyone on the court, and myself included.
All right, so then how do you think the team's going to respond throughout practice this week, looking forward to the 2 matches again this week against St. Francis and a really big match Saturday in what has turned out to be a pretty heated rivalry over the past couple years with Penn State, each team usually winning on their home court? Yeah,
that's something I've been fortunate to be a part of. So for the last 4 years, we played them, I think, way back when. The first time, I guess 4 years ago, at Penn State, I think we lost. And then the next year we played at home, and we won in 5 sets. The following year we played at Penn State, I think, and lost. And then just last year we beat them at home in 4 sets. So and then that was a great match. That was a really great match. And so I know that I don't know if they always expected this rivalry, as you call it, to not be here, but we certainly do, and we look forward to taking it to them at their home court. But in terms of how we're going to bounce back from this weekend's loss, is all we have to remember is the feeling that we had as we brought it into the huddle, or as we had to go up to the net and shake all the other players' hands. It wasn't a feeling like our match against Stanford when we lost that tight match. Of course, we hate. You gotta hate to lose, but this was different. This was just an awful feeling, and I think that sometimes, and we will from here use that feeling as motivation to never feel like that again, to go forward from here and play so that not just to win, but to keep that from happening.
So kind of circling back to tie everything together that we've talked about so far this segment, being a senior, being one of the captains this year, and having so many young players on the team, how is that relationship and that leadership position kind of help going forward to prepare for such a big weekend like this is going to be, especially being on the road in what could end up being pretty hostile environments?
Yeah, well, it's we have 3 days of practice before we leave, and then we have a pretty nice road trip. Hopefully not too long, depending on the weather. Hope it doesn't get extended.
True.
But we have a match on Friday first against St. Francis, and then Penn State is on Saturday. So as a senior, all you can do is push each other in the gym every day. And like I said, some people have been, been injured or not feeling well, and it's that time of year everybody likes to get sick. But the thing is, no matter what way you can contribute, you have to do what you can do. Do whatever you can do and do it to the best of your ability. So if that means just sitting down and talking to one of our middles and helping help him understand how to read the setter, or what to do when the ball gets set outside the net, or whatever the case may be like that. It's just a lot of it's going to be communication, because I think right now everyone's getting along really well. Like we're a very tight group, so we just have to make sure everyone's on the same page for the game itself.
I definitely agree with all of that. So continuing and wrapping up here a little bit in our final minute, you finished your bachelor's degree after only 3 years here at IPFW, and you're actually now in your 5th year since you redshirted as a freshman, and you'll be completing your master's degree in May. Talk a little bit about what you've been studying and what you hope to do with that in the coming years.
Well, that's a lot for a minute, but yeah, so I finished my bachelor's degree in bio-pre-med after 3 years. And then I continued on here still, and been working on my master's in immunology and oncology. And so I'll be finishing up my thesis in May, and that's been a long time coming, a lot of work put into it. So for this semester, it'll be a lot of writing. But my goal for that is to do something in research for the next year, and take the MCAT in May and go to med school. And from there, not exactly sure. That's a long path and a lot more school. But maybe someday get into orthopedics, actually. So something that's kind of sport related.
Well, after knowing you for so many years, being a roommate and being teammates, I definitely think that you'd be someone that I would maybe trust. As Coach used to say back in the day, if he's on the table, are you going to be able to pull through in the clutch?
Yeah, well, I sure hope so.
A big thank you to Andrew Sellan, senior opposite here for the IPFW men's volleyball team. We'll be looking forward to speaking with him possibly again later this season. During our final segment this week, we'll be talking again with head coach Ryan Perrotte as we look forward to this week's matches for the VolleyDons against St. Francis and Penn State. We'll be right back here on VolleyDons Weekly.
My areas of research focus on the intersection of epistemology and medical ethics. I'm primarily interested in clinical decision making. One way to characterize my work is that I'm curious how decisions go wrong in medicine, both of the physician and for the patient, and even for the policymaker. Then I also do some work in research ethics. How does one respect a patient or research subject while still trying to find robust conclusions that can guide future medical practice?
Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong. Back to the third segment. Head coach Ryan Perrotte joins me again after just speaking with Andrew Sellan during our Spotlight segment. What did you think about his take on playing in the afternoon and how that shouldn't have been a reason to necessarily play as poorly as they did?
Well, he's absolutely right. There is no excuse for performance, especially, he's right, with the fact that we actually practiced during that time period. But something funny happens to the body when you throw off a regular routine. You may practice in that time frame, but then when you play on weekends at a different time frame, perhaps the body changes. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I like to tell you that there is no excuse for it or a reason, but in sport, is there any rhyme or reason to anything? We just don't know. So, but he's right. We do practice during that time period, so it shouldn't have an effect in the outcome of how we play.
Perhaps they didn't do all of their pre-match superstitions like you are sure to do with everything you do in life to make sure things go exactly how you planned them to.
And you're not going to believe this because on Saturday I said before the match I didn't do some things that I usually do because I am the most superstitious human being on the planet. You did say that. And there were things that I didn't do, and as soon as the match started and that second point happened, I remember saying, "You idiot, you should have went through this pre-match routine that I usually do." But I mean, that's, believe it or not, that's how the cookie crumbles.
That's definitely one way to look at it. So then looking ahead to this weekend's matches, Friday night, the VolleyDons take on St. Francis University out of Laredo, Pennsylvania on their home court. It's about a 7.5, 8-hour bus trip for the guys. It'll be their first bus ride this season, leaving on Thursday. How does the travel aspect of the volleyball season kind of play effect to your weekly preparation, getting ready for 2 matches this weekend?
Well, it doesn't. It's a short practice week, and because we actually practiced on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday on Monday, we kind of have kept it somewhat normal, except for the fact on Thursday, which is our travel day to State College, we'll have the day off. So that might work in our favor before we play on Friday. But we've tried to keep it as normal as possible. It hurts a little bit because of the travel day in terms of scouting or preparation in that regard, watching perhaps more video than we'd like or getting some shot chart analysis, that kind of thing. But overall, in terms of our practice planning, etc., everything stays the same. It'll be very interesting, though, because this is our first road trip of the year. We're on the road, I think, for the next 7 matches, I believe, 3.5 weeks. And it'll be very interesting to see the toll it takes on the players. Because when you travel, you know, you're uncomfortable, you're not sleeping in your own bed, you're not eating your own food. It's a little bit different in terms of the routine. So this will be a very interesting weekend for us as we kick off this long road trip.
But there's something to be said about the travel schedule also. I can just speak not only as my time as a player here, but especially from the coaching side that I experienced during the fall at the University of Kentucky. We were extremely successful on the road. I think we only lost 1 or maybe 2 true road matches the entire season. So do you think that possibly going on the road, having a few less distractions of extracurricular activities, potential family problems or commitments that players might have, classes, so kind of eliminating that part of it might actually cause for the team to perform better?
Yeah, and I think there's truth to that. I think going on the road, there's a lot of truth to that. Less distractions, and believe it or not, I think expectations change when you're on the road. I said that, I remember when I was in grade school, and I said that. Expectations change when you go on the road because of the fact that you don't have all these people that know who you are or familiar with you, and there's this certain uneasiness about that. But when you go on the road, you're much more disciplined, You're much more controlled in terms of the things that you do in a timely fashion. So there is some reason to that, or at least rhyme to that, in regards to how you can perhaps perform better without those distractions.
So then looking ahead from Friday's match now to Saturday's match, we'll be taking on the Penn State Nittany Lions, who are ranked right now in the AVCA polling. Had a split weekend this past weekend, beating Lewis in 5 sets from the MIVA and then losing to Loyola Chicago. How do you think that those two matches kind of speak to the type of team that Penn State's going to be when we take the floor Saturday evening?
Well, let me go back a little bit first. St. Francis just beat Lewis University in 5 at Lewis, by the way, and that match on Friday will be very difficult. It's almost like Harvard was for us in Sacred Heart. We match up very well against that team, but that team was going to bring the energy, and they're feeling good about themselves having beaten Lewis. The Saturday match against Penn State will take care of itself because it's a big name institution. You know, you're already into it. You don't need a lot of motivation to play a big time school. There's going to be a massive crowd there because there's a huge boys club volleyball tournament that's going on there at State College that weekend on the campus of Penn State. So that match Saturday will take care of itself just from an emotional standpoint, where mentally and physically you're already into it because of the hype. Saturday you got to work for it a little bit. Even though you've been there a day, you're going, you're playing St. Francis, perhaps a lesser club or team, but that's not how we're approaching it, because I think that's arguably the biggest of the two matches. If you win the one on Friday, you walk into Saturday's match feeling good about yourself especially after the way we played last Saturday against Harvard. If we lose, then you're kind of going, uh-oh, what do we need to do to win? And playing Penn State, who's a very good volleyball team, they've been to the Final Four umpteen number of years in a row. It's a tough thing. So I'm just really concerned, and we're really dialed in about just playing that match on Friday against St. Francis.
Definitely taking everything one match at a time. What do you think, or as a coach, what do you want to see out of the team for their first road trip of the season?
A team, togetherness. You know, I think that's the biggest thing about going on the road is the camaraderie. And the most successful teams aren't the ones with the most skill or the most talent. It's the ones that come together, the team. And that's the one thing that I'm going to look forward to, because I think there'll be an opportunity for some guys that have yet to play this season, or at least see significant playing time, will get that opportunity this weekend in Pennsylvania.
Definitely an exciting time for IPFW men's volleyball as they start, like you said, an extended road trip, not only finishing the non-conference part of the schedule, but then starting the MIVA schedule in a couple of weeks on the road for the first couple of matches. Do you find that this time of year, as the semester kids are starting to get settled a little bit more, that the school part of it kind of takes care of itself and they can focus a little bit more on volleyball? Or do you think that it's all kind of going to get mixed up as we start traveling more?
I think the focus is easy because it's volleyball and school. So I think that's the easy part. The tough part, however, for us is, at least in this part of the country, is the weather. Because the weather is cold now and it's about to turn. There's going to be coming snow and it's going to get even colder. That's the toughest part, to balance the weather with the volleyball with the school. If you can do all those 3 things and get it somehow perfect, life's good.
Well then, in that case, for this weekend, let's hope for good weather, some solid team effort, consistent volleyball, and we'll see if we can sneak out 2 victories.
And 2 wins.
2 wins on the road for sure. A big thank you to our sponsors this week, Alco, Active Ankle, ASICS, Glenbrook Dodge, and Hyatt Place. For our guest during the Spotlight segment, Andrew Sellan, head coach Ryan Perrotte, and myself, Jordan Armstrong. Thank you very much for joining us on this week's edition of VolleyDons Weekly. And as a wise predecessor of mine once said, you have to get your serve in.